We were finding here in this random parking lot near Skøyen station in Oslo. And this spot is not only a great place to see a bunch of trains, it's also the start of a very interesting line and a very interesting part of the history of the railways in Norway. Today, I'm going to be telling you all about where the track to the left goes. Welcome to the story of the Oslo Vestbanestasjon. When the Oslo Tunnel opened in 1980, many saw this as the sign of the immediate downfall of the two former train station terminals, Oslo's East Station and Oslo's West Station. However, the West Station somehow managed to carry on all the way until 1989, while the East Station was eventually merged into the much larger and newer Oslo S. With the closure of Oslo Vestbanestasjon, many plans were immediately drawn up for redeveloping the land. In fact, part of the proposed Fjordbanen tram line was supposed to run along the former rail alignment, in a similar way to what Bergen did with parts of the old Vossline section and the Nesttun Osbanen. However, these plans never really fully came to fruition, for one major reason. But to know that reason, we're going to have to go there and see it for ourselves. Welcome to this cool trail, or bike path, in Kinnebæk. And right over there is a cruise terminal and Philipsstad. Now, what lies in between Philipsstad and Kinnebæk, you might ask? Apart from this bridge and freeway? Well, you're about to see. Yes, over here. This Philipsstad Railroad. You can't see it down this meshed way. This is where that line went. So that's it, right? Story's over? Well, actually, no. See, after line branches off to stay, you'd think these are just like access tracks into the yard. But the line used to go further. To do that, we're gonna have to go back up, follow the trail. Alright, quick side note here before we continue our adventure, and that is that I have forgotten to mention the abandoned station at Skarpsno. The main reason I didn't go visit this station is because the only real thing left of it is the platforms, and there aren't really any good vantage points of it that don't involve trespassing. So yeah, just wanted to acknowledge that station did exist. It was a local-only station, but it is now long gone. So, back to the video. So, Meter's bridge, where you can see the back into the yard, and it looks like the tracks go underground here. The tracks look like they just end, but there's this gap in the trees here that shows the line clearly went further. So, on we go. So, there's another really important part. And it's the building right here, this bridge. This bridge looks like it goes over nothing. It has the exact same design as the two bridges before it, which basically proves that this is where the rail line used to go. This building looks so much newer than most of the other ones around it. And so there's the one further down. There's slight difference, but you can still tell it's nowhere near the same style as both the ones to the left. That's because these buildings are all relatively new and were built here after the Vestbana station was closed in the 80s. So, yeah. So, I made it to Akerbrygge, which is like Oslo's version of National Landing, or what, the waterfront or the wharf, or Oslo's version of Hudson Yards, if you will. For these not super newish modern buildings, with the holdout being this yellow one right here. And this yellow one right here is actually exactly what we've been looking for. This right here was the old Oslo Vestbana railway station. And you could catch trains in and out of here from as late as 1988. Now, granted, it's closed since then. The building has been preserved, but all of its approach tracks and things have all been mainly ruined. Not ruined, but replaced by the National Museum, which is huge because of that. You can see here there's still a clock. So, why did this station last all the way up until the 80s? And why have two stations in the first place? Well, there's two main reasons for that, which I'll get into in a bit. First, we should probably come over here to get a good look at the front of the building. So, let's finally talk about the history of this station. The Oslo Vestbana station, or Oslo V, opened in the year 1872 as the terminus of the Drammen line. As the Norwegian rail network continued to grow, more and more routes were added that branched off of the Drammen line, and in turn fed into the Oslo Vest station, which then made it the central hub for all trains heading to the west of Norway out of Oslo, with the main exception of the Bergen line, and that's for good reason. You see, at the time of the station's opening, well actually since the 1850s, the director of Railways Norway was a man by the name of Carl Abraham Peel. Peel, considering the geography of Norway, with all the mountains and fjords, thought that a narrower track gauge might work better for the country's rail network, and therefore championed that every single new rail line to be built in the country should be built using the rail gauge of 3 feet 6 inches or 1067 millimeters, with the exception of the lines that ran to Sweden as to not disrupt the border connection. This decision proved quite unpopular with most people, as having two separate rail gauges for the entire country that were incompatible with each other seemed like a pretty dumb decision, and in hindsight, it really was. The narrow gauge mania in Norway lasted for almost half a century. However, when it was finally driven out, with the final nail in the coffin being the conversion of the Bergen line to standard gauge from narrow gauge, Peel had since died, and many, many lines had been built using this narrow gauge. It was for this exact reason that Bergen trains used to leave Oslo via the Rua-Hønefoss line and out up through the Gjøvik line to actually get to Bergen. The final line to be converted to standard gauge in Norway was the Vestfold line, which was converted in 1949. After the Vestfold line was converted to standard gauge is when the downfall of the station really started. You see, with all Bergen trains leaving from Oslo Øst station instead of Oslo Vest station, Oslo Vest station didn't really have any major long-distance trains running along it aside from the Sørland line. This created a huge imbalance in importance between the two stations, as Oslo Øst had no less than 4 different inner-city long-distance trains leaving it. So Oslo Vest was cemented as firmly being a commuter station, and therefore it didn't really gain as much respect in terms of rolling stock care that the eastern side of the network did, despite still serving a good amount of the Norwegian railway network. However, the downfall of Oslo Vest station really kicked up in 1973 with opening of the Lieråsen tunnel. This tunnel, which bypassed a really windy single-track section through Spikkestad, and directly connected Asker and Lier. Also, vastly increased capacity on all the lines into Oslo Vest, which the older and antiquated rolling stock that had less care taken of it really couldn't handle that well. Sure, you had your replacements coming in with your new Class 69 trains. However, the state of Norwegian railways in general wasn't that great at the time. I mean, this picture of a EL1 locomotive at the West Station was taken in the 1970s, and this one was taken in 1922. And yes, it's the same class of locomotive. When you again add on the induced demand from the opening of the Lieråsen Tunnel, which increased capacity on the line, it then became pretty clear that Oslo needed a better solution than having two separate rail terminals, preferably one interconnected one. And the question soon became, well, where to put it? Well, to save quite a few sentences, long story short, they ended up going with basically just at the Oslo Øst station. Pretty much just expanded it to become Oslo S. And when the Oslo Tunnel finally opened in 1980, trains could go directly from one side of the rail network to another. And that's what happened, and that's when the station closed, right? Well, no, it somehow lived on up until 1989, serving trains to Stavanger along the Sørlandsbanen, as well as trains on the Vestfold line. However, this did eventually come to an end, and the Oslo Vest station and Skarpsno station closed down with it. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the existence of the Havnebanen, which was a rail connection that was a street-running, freight-only rail line that connected Oslo Vest and Oslo Øst down around Akershus Festning. I was originally going to include a bit more of in-person footage of it in this video, but what you're seeing on screen right now is pretty much all that's left. This two tunnels and a gap between them. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe. This is probably the most I've had to work on a video, and definitely the longest I've had to walk for making a video, so it's been fun. Yeah, but that's going to do it. Bergen Transit Line Tour for Line 1 coming very soon. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. I'm the Autistic Transit Fan. I'm signing off. See ya.